All right, let's jump right in. What we're going to do today is map out a really unique and honestly pretty complex symbolic framework that's derived entirely from the Quran. So, this isn't a historical reading, not at all. It's about trying to uncover a kind of cosmic blueprint, a map of meaning that's woven right into the text itself.
And this quote, it sets the stage perfectly. It's asking us to let go of the idea that this is a simple, straight line story. Instead, we need to think of the text as this multi layered, interconnected system. Where themes and symbols echo and repeat all over the place, kind of like a symphony. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll learn how to actually read this symbolic map. Then we'll dive into its central conflict, the pieces that connect everything, the engine that actually drives it all, and then we'll see how it all comes together in this wild, looping model of time. Okay, so before we can really start exploring this cosmic blueprint, we kind of need the legend for the map, right? It's built on two basic layers of interpretation, and getting a handle on them is absolutely the key to understanding the whole thing. The way this framework organizes its ideas is super important. On the one hand, you have what it calls pillars. Think of these as the bedrock, direct, clear statements from the Quran, like creation in 6 days. They're the raw material. But then, on the other hand, you have the symbolic weaves, and this is where the interpretation comes in. It takes a pillar, like mountains as pegs, and weaves it into a much bigger symbolic idea, like pegs as lineage connectors. All right, now that we know how to read the map, let's look at what it's actually showing us. At the absolute core of this blueprint is a primal duality, this epic cosmic conflict between two opposing forces that are constantly pushing and pulling, the force of light and the force of fire. Now, to really get this conflict, we need to look at its key symbols. While the big picture is light versus fire, this framework gets more specific. It uses iron as the physical symbol for light. The Quran says iron was sent down, right? So here it represents divine order, or mulk. Its opposite, fire, represents tagut. You can think of that as rebellious human ego, tyranny, that kind of thing. And you can see this difference play out perfectly with these two symbolic mountains. First, you have the elevated mountain, the House of Iron. This is all about divine order. It's home to figures like Suleiman or Solomon, who represents God-given wisdom. The outcome here? Submission, which leads to light. Then you have the complete opposite, the man-made mountain, the pyramid. This is the House of Fire, a monument to human arrogance, with Pharaoh as its poster boy. And where does that path lead? To destruction, a kind of purification by force. So we have these two huge opposing forces, light and fire. But how do they actually connect to our world, to destiny itself? Well, that brings us to the next layer of the blueprint, the connectors. So the question this framework asks is a pretty big one. If you've got these two massive cosmic forces, what are the connection points? What actually fastens them to our reality? And the answer, in this interpretation, is something called the peg principle. And remember, this idea is built on those scriptural pillars we talked about. The Quran literally mentions the pegs, or nails, of Noah's Ark. It describes mountains as pegs that hold the earth steady. And, maybe most fascinatingly, it calls Pharaoh the possessor of pegs. So the word itself is right there, waiting to be interpreted. So, building on those pillars, the symbolic weave is that these pegs are cosmic connectors of destiny. They're not just physical things, they're metaphysical fasteners. Think about it. Noah's pegs are salvific. They fasten humanity to a vessel of salvation. But Pharaoh's pegs are the exact opposite. They're oppressive, pinning people down in a system of tyranny and corruption. It really makes you ask the question, right? What system are you pegged to? Okay, so we've got the forces and the connectors, the more static parts of the system. But how does it all move? What's the dynamic part? Well, now we're going to look at the very engine that drives creation and revelation forward in this cosmic cycle. And the analogy this model uses is just brilliant, a four-stroke engine. First, you've got intake, a moment of pure divine input, symbolized by the birth of Isa, Jesus, receiving sustenance from God. Then comes compression. That's life, right? The soul getting tested, squeezed by worldly pressures. That pressure builds to ignition, a sacrifice, like the martyrdom of Yahya, John the Baptist, that just sparks a huge transformation. And finally, exhaust. The impurities get expelled, and a new, purified spiritual state is born. It's just this continuous, powerful cycle of renewal.
And this is where it all comes together. We've talked about the duality, the pegs, the engine of creation, and now we're going to see how all of those concepts get plugged into a model of time that is, well, it's going to bend your brain a little bit. To really get this next idea, you have to completely throw out your normal linear idea of time. I'm serious. We are not on a straight path from past to future. According to this blueprint, prophetic history works on a Mobius loop. You know, that twisted strip of paper? Where if you follow the path all the way around, you end up right back where you started, but on the other side. And here's a picture of that loop in action. You start with a point of pure inspiration, like what the Prophet Muhammad received. That eventually leads to a need for a total reset, like Noah's flood. That reset creates a new covenant, symbolized by Abraham's sacrifice. This allows for a rebirth, like the pure word of Isa. But over time, things decay. Kingdoms turn into tagut, into arrogance. And right from that point of decay, the cycle loops right back to the beginning, creating the need for new inspiration. It's an eternal pattern. So let me leave you with this one final thought that really brings it all home. In this framework, the Quran itself is the Mobius loop. On one hand, it's a fixed historical text, the endpoint of that cycle. But at the very same time, for the person who engages with it today, it becomes living, direct inspiration. It becomes the beginning of a whole new cycle. A timeless text that is also somehow always present.